As the night settles over the Exeter airfield in southern England, hundreds of paratroopers anxiously wait to be called to board the planes that would lead them across the Channel and behind the enemy lines in Normandy. Among them is a group of soldiers who, quite the opposite, look more than determined to jump into the action. Indeed, these are not ordinary soldiers, nor do they look so, as their commander applies war paints to their mohawk-shaved heads. These men have very little interest in the discipline and regulation that the Army offers. All they're interested in is their mission. Meet Jake McNiece and his Filthy 13, an unorthodox band of warriors who fought the war their own way, becoming a model to one of the greatest World War II movie classics. As is usually the case, the story of a great hero has a rather ordinary background. So was the case with James Elbert Jake McNiece, a small-town boy from Oklahoma. Born to an Irish Choctaw family, James McNiece entered the world on May 24, 1919 in Maysville, Oklahoma. He was the 9th child in a brood of 10. In 1931, the McNiece family relocated to Ponca City, Oklahoma, where young Jake partook in high school football and, in 1939, celebrated his graduation. During the subsequent 2 years, Jake worked at the Pine Bluff Arsenal, a position that introduced him to the practical use of explosives. When the United States entered the throes of war in 1941, Jake's occupation was that of a fireman, a role that allowed him to apply his knowledge of demolitions to bring down condemned buildings. While his fireman status could have offered Jake an exemption from the military draft, he was not content to sit idly by while his fellow citizens marched off to serve their country. Jake, too, was motivated to contribute to the war effort. But it was another, more personal reason that prompted him to leave Ponca City. A recent altercation had put him on the police's radar. Viewing enlistment in the Army as a double solution to his predicament, Jake found himself standing in a recruitment center in September of 1942. For Jake and his wild nature, fighting the war made sense only if he was in the center of the action, which is why he only wanted to join the Paratroopers. Upon enlisting, he underwent basic and advanced training, after which he was sent to airborne school at Tocoa. Over there, McNiece quickly demonstrated his physical and mental prowess, but his temperament often landed him in hot water. His impulsive actions, like his confrontations with the mess sergeant and military police, led to frequent stays in the stockade, the military prison. Despite his propensity for causing mischief, McNiece proved to be a valuable asset to the Army. He eventually earned his paratrooper wings, and he was assigned to a 506 Parachute Infantry Regiment Demolition Squad, part of the esteemed 101st Airborne Division. McNiece and his unit journeyed to England in 1943, eager to prove their mettle against the Nazis. On September 15th of 1943, his unit established its base on the expansive property of Sir Ernest Wills, the British cigarette tycoon. Within the unit, where discipline was held in the highest regard, McNiece swiftly surrounded himself with individuals whose characters mirrored his own. To this eclectic demolition selection, the concept of discipline seemed alien. They completely disregarded formalities such as saluting officers, and the hijinks were their daily routine. For example, dissatisfied with the bland military rations, McNiece spotted a culinary opportunity within Sir Will's estate. The land was rich with game, offering an abundant supply of deer and rabbits. Day after day, McNiece and his comrades poached these creatures, supplementing their meals with fresh meat. It was only thanks to their exemplary training performance that they avoided being disciplined or court-martialed. Their nonchalant attitude extended to the living conditions within their Quonset hut. Their mattresses were filled with dried corn chunks placed over wired frames. Striking these mattresses would release a cloud of black dust, forcing the men to sleep in their uniforms to avoid being covered in grime. However, their hut was full of discarded fishskins, unwashed uniforms, and a disgusting odor. As he always did, McNiece had a good excuse for the mess. He and his men were rationed to one cold bath a week with long waiting lines, and the persistent dust problem made cleaning clothes futile. This is why, apart from their ill discipline, the unit became known as the Filthy 13. No one knows who coined the name, but McNiece and his comrades took no offense to it. Instead, they wore it as a badge of honor. Throughout their stay in England, absences without leaves, arrests, and regular reprimands became the norm for the group. However, despite their lack of discipline, they assured skeptic officers of their unwavering commitment to successfully executing their missions. They referred to their exceptional performance in training exercises and war simulations as a testament to their capabilities, effectively silencing their critics. These instances of excellence showed there was more to this unconventional group than meets the eye. As D-Day dawned, a tangible sense of anticipation gripped American combat units. The 506th Regiment, of which the Filthy 13 was a part of, was planned to be at the vanguard of one of the largest assaults in the history of warfare. McNiece and his men were more than ready for it. Their mission was of significant strategic importance: to destroy 3 bridges and hold one over the Deux River Canal, therefore obstructing enemy reinforcements and providing an avenue for Allied advancement. When the call finally came, the Filthy 13, along with 7 additional soldiers, made their way to Exeter airfield. McNiece had his head freshly shaved into a mohawk, for which he found an excuse in his partial Native American descent. In fact, it was a practical response to the lice that they were likely to encounter. Needless to say, the rest of the unit shaved their heads in the same manner. Accentuating their unconventional look, they applied war paint, transforming their appearance to such an extent that only their uniforms marked them as American soldiers. Subsequently, they climbed aboard their C-47, joining a vast airborne armada headed towards Normandy. As expected, the landing was anything but easy, as their aircraft suffered a direct hit, which sent one of the soldiers flying out of a gaping hole. Despite the sudden chaos, the remaining men parachuted into the night. However, upon landing, McNiece found himself behind enemy lines, alone. Sneaking under the cover of night, he eventually encountered a few fellow paratroopers from his platoon, but not his squad. After determining their position, they pushed towards their objective, engaging with German forces and managing to obliterate a command post on their way. They successfully destroyed 2 bridges and secured the bridge that they were to hold. Despite being outnumbered, they successfully repelled 2 German attacks on the bridge. Their relief, however, was nowhere in sight. On the 4th day, the Air Force fighters appeared and they bombed from the bridge. All of their effort was futile. Raged with anger, McNiece and his men withdrew from the area. Throughout the rest of the battle for Normandy, the Filthy 13 continued, fighting where needed and aiding in the crucial assault on the town of Carentan. By the end of June, McNiece evaluated the losses. Of the 20 men who had set out in the C-47, 8 survived. Among the original Filthy 13, only 6 members remained. Post their successful mission in France, the members of the Filthy 13 were redeployed to England, where they found themselves in familiar predicaments, being absent without leave and spending time in the lockup. By September 17, 1944, the Filthy 13, reinforced with fresh faces, were back in action as part of Operation Market Garden. The 506th was tasked with seizing bridges around Eindhoven, and McNiece's unit was heavily involved in the intense 5-day combat, suffering 2 casualties in the process. They also engaged in combat alongside the celebrated Easy Company and participated in the rescue of the British 1st Airborne Paratroopers, the Red Devils, trapped near Arnhem before being pulled off the line. During these fights, McNiece was promoted to platoon sergeant. Unfortunately, Operation Market Garden did not achieve its intended objectives, despite the valor displayed by the paratroopers from both countries. They landed in the middle of the 9th and 10th SS Panzer Divisions, and the airborne units were ill-equipped to counter the heavy tanks, culminating in the operation's failure. In December 1944, Private First Class James McNiece, now widely popular for his rebellious nature, again found himself in trouble. After taking an unauthorized extended absence, he was suggested to volunteer for Pathfinder training back in England. Though Pathfinder missions were considered suicidal, McNiece accepted the offer, as it provided the comforts of clean sheets, hot food, and the opportunity to relax in the safety of England. McNiece's decision quickly spread amongst his fellow paratroopers, many of whom admired him, and they too volunteered. Upon arriving at training camp, McNiece was, to his surprise, promoted to First Sergeant. Captain Frank Brown, the commanding officer of the Pathfinder detachment, believed McNiece's experience and leadership could whip the group into shape. McNiece accepted the promotion under the condition that his fellow soldiers would have reasonable accommodations and regular passes to enjoy themselves. McNiece organized his team and began training for their Pathfinder missions. It didn't last long before they were tasked with their first mission, and what mission it was: to help the surrounded 101st Airborne Division in the Battle of the Bulge. Their task was to guide planes for airborne and glider operations by setting AN/PPN-1A Eureka beacons on the ground. It was December 1944. The weather was harsh, with freezing temperatures and poor visibility, making drops nearly impossible. Additionally, McNiece's unit faced the risk of landing on top of the enemy if they even slightly missed their target. On December 23rd at 6:45 a.m., the C-47s carrying the Pathfinders took off from Chalgrove, heading towards Bastogne. The Germans unleashed anti-aircraft fire as the planes approached, despite an 88mm round hitting the plane right between McNiece and his friend Sergeant Mers. The Pathfinder successfully landed on the outskirts of Bastogne. They quickly set up beacons and markers between Senon-Champs and Bastogne. Within half an hour of their jump, 40 C-47s loaded with supplies descended upon Bastogne, braving heavy enemy fire. At 11:50 a.m., the supplies began parachuting down, with a total of 241 planes delivering 144 tons over the course of 4 hours. McNiece and his fellow Pathfinders established 2 additional drop zones during the day. The Pathfinders continued their mission in the following days by engaging more beacons. At one point, they all almost got killed when a bomb hit the house that they were staying in. December 27th marked the final day of supply drops, after which McNiece and his men joined the 506th and fought with them through January. According to General Dwight D. Eisenhower, the Americans would have hardly won at Bastogne if it weren't for the Pathfinders who enabled the supply drop. On February 13th of 1945, Jack McNiece participated in his final jump as part of Operation Varsity, marking a remarkable accomplishment of 4 combat jumps as a paratrooper. Prior to his departure, he made one last memorable visit to Paris, engaging in an alcohol-fueled quarrel that resulted in a punctured eardrum. McNiece concluded his military service and was discharged in February of 1946. Upon returning to the United States, McNiece fulfilled a promise to his father by embarking on a cross-country journey, after which he engaged in odd jobs but often lost employment due to drunkenness and brawls. After a tragic loss and subsequent remarriage, McNiece transformed his life, becoming a devoted father and abstaining from alcohol. He worked as a postal carrier until he retired. Attending 101st reunions, he reconnected with his comrades, witnessing their passing as he remained the last survivor. On January 21st of 2013, at the age of 93, McNiece, the once notorious Hellraiser, passed away. In the 1960s, Hollywood executives approached McNiece to make a film about his unit's remarkable warpath, which he declined due to the lingering memories of war. The resulting movie, The Dirty Dozen, loosely portrayed the 13th story, featuring Lee Marvin lead a group of criminals against the Nazis. In his later interviews, McNiece and his comrades always emphasized that they were nothing like what the public saw in a movie. The way his comrade Jack Agnew said it, "We weren't murderers or anything. We just didn't do everything we were supposed to do in some ways and did a whole lot more than the Army wanted us to do in other ways." Thank you so much for watching this episode. If you liked it, please make sure to share it and give us a thumbs up. Let us know your thoughts on McNiece and the Filthy 13 in the comments. And don't forget to subscribe to our Militology channel for more content. Stay tuned by hitting the bell icon to be notified of our newest videos to jump into battle. Thank you.